The city sparkled with golden lights as evening fell, and at the very heart of its most luxurious street stood the grandest restaurant of them all, a palace of glass and marble where only the richest and most powerful dined. Crystal chandeliers glowed above velvet curtains, silverware shone under the soft light, and the air was filled with the hum of laughter, business deals, and gossip of the wealthy. At one corner table, near the tall glass window that overlooked a blooming garden, sat a little girl no older than 8, her silky chestnut hair tied neatly with a pale ribbon that matched the powder blue dress she wore. She looked like a porcelain doll placed in a world that did not know how to treat her, her big brown eyes carrying a silence deeper than anyone around her could imagine. This little girl was Amelia, the only daughter of Richard Beaumont, a man who was not just wealthy but a tycoon whose name alone could silence boardrooms and bend markets. Tonight, as every night, he was dressed in an immaculate navy suit, his phone glued to his ear, his face stern with endless discussions of contracts and mergers. But while he commanded the attention of every man who shook his hand, Amelia sat quietly beside him, invisible in a world that pretended she did not exist. For Amelia was deaf. The sounds of laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, the distant notes of the restaurant's piano, all of it was locked away from her, as though she lived behind a glass wall. She could see it, but she could never step into it. The waiters came and went, placing plates of delicate food before her without ever looking into her eyes. The other children of the elite, when they visited, rarely spoke to her, some even mocked her silence, their words sharp knives she could not hear but could always feel. And so she learned to fold her hands politely, to look at the garden, to pretend she did not notice the way the world ignored her. But deep down, her little heart longed for something simple, not jewels, not toys, not grand mansions, just someone who would see her, someone who would speak in the only language her heart truly understood. On that very evening, fate was quietly arranging an encounter that would change Amelia's life forever. For among the bustling staff of waiters and waitresses, all rushing about with trays balanced on their hands and forced smiles on their faces, there was a new hire, Claire, a shy young woman of 22 who had joined the restaurant only a week ago. Claire wore the simple black uniform and white apron, her chestnut brown hair tied in a neat bun, her eyes always lowered when speaking to customers. She was not like the other waitresses who laughed easily with rich patrons, who played the part of charming servants. Claire was quiet, nervous, careful. She had grown up in poverty, working 3 jobs just to survive, and she carried on her shoulders the heavy burden of her mother's illness back home. Every coin she earned was a lifeline. Every shift at the restaurant was a battle to hold on to hope. She had learned long ago that people with money often looked at her as though she were dust beneath their shoes, and so she kept her voice soft, her steps light, her head down. Her dream was simple, to save enough to take her mother to a proper hospital, to one day live without the constant fear of losing everything. That night, Claire's manager tapped her on the shoulder and whispered sharply, "Table 13. The Beaumonts. Don't make a mistake." Her stomach nodded instantly. Everyone knew who Richard Beaumont was, the kind of man who could have someone fired with a single glance. Claire adjusted her tray, steadied her breath, and made her way across the shining floor. As she approached, her eyes fell on the little girl sitting beside the great tycoon. At first, Claire thought Amelia looked like every other rich child she had seen, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, perfectly silent. But then, as she leaned closer to place the glasses of water on the table, her gaze met Amelia's, and in that brief connection, Claire froze. There was something hauntingly familiar in those eyes, not just sadness, but loneliness, the kind of loneliness that could swallow a soul whole. Claire gave a polite smile and softly greeted her, but Amelia did not respond. Instead, the girl tapped her fingers on the table in a rhythm, her lips moving in shapes that produced no sound. And suddenly, like lightning striking her heart, Claire understood, the little girl was deaf. Memories rushed back to Claire in that instant, memories of her childhood, when her very best friend had been a deaf girl named Sophie. They had spent countless afternoons under the summer sun, laughing not with voices but with hands, speaking a language of gestures and signs that outsiders never cared to understand. Claire had learned sign language not from duty but from love, from the bond of friendship that had made her young world brighter. And though life had pulled her away from that world, though she had buried that part of herself in silence to survive, her fingers remembered. They twitched now, aching to speak again. But fear wrapped itself around Claire's chest. What if she was wrong? What if the girl's father thought she was mocking? What if her manager saw and scolded her? Rich people often despised anything they could not control. Claire hesitated, clutching the tray tighter, her heart pounding. Then Amelia looked up at her again, those wide brown eyes silently begging for someone to reach through the glass wall of her world. In that moment, Claire's fear melted like snow under the sun. With trembling hands, she slowly raised her fingers and formed the simplest, gentlest sign she knew, hello. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Amelia blinked, her lips parting as though she could not believe what she had just seen. And then, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, her entire face lit up with joy. A smile stretched across her face, not the polite smile she wore for her father's business friends, but a real smile, pure and uncontained. Her little hands flew up eagerly, replying in excited signs, hello. You know this. Claire felt tears sting her eyes as she nodded and signed back, yes, I know. And in that instant, in a room filled with wealth and pride and shallow conversations, something extraordinary bloomed at table 13, a bridge, a bond, a friendship waiting to be written by fate.